Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to Sunday Live. How are we all doing in chat? Are we all okay? Hope everybody else watching as well is pretty good and you've had a good weekend as well. Before I go any further, by the way, massive apologies if you hear a load of explosions in the background. We're not under attack. Don't panic. It is just bonfire night or bonfire night weekend here in the UK. So there's fireworks going off everywhere at the moment. But hopefully people will keep them to a minimum. You know, selfish, so selfish. But anyway, yes. Hope we're all well. We've got loads to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about Max Verstappen's chances of a title next year. Red Bull seem to feel that with Honda on board, they've got a great chance of making him F1's youngest ever world champion. Yes, I did report that in Friday's news roundup, but it's quite an interesting one, that one to discuss. I'll be doing that with Dan in just a moment. And also, two proposed races to be added to the calendar in 2020, which means if we were to keep the calendar as it is now and Miami turns up as well, we could end up with 24 races. That seems like a hell of a lot, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm also going to give you an update on what's coming up over the next week. We've got something we're trialling on Thursday, which we're very excited about, so tell you that one as well. And of course, we will be taking some of your questions as we always do. A little pause there as I try and conveniently slide into Discord. But we'll kick it off and we'll say a very good evening to Dan. Hello, Dan, sir.
Hello, Sean. Hello, everyone in chat. Great to be here once again. I'm really excited for this one. Happy bonfire night as well.
Yeah, fireworks
Well,
everywhere,
not
mate.
yet.
So
Yeah, it's a bit
inconsiderate.
crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it is. I'm very disappointed in the great British public.
It's terrible, ruining my stream. But yes, couple of really good topics actually to sink our teeth into, Dan. Bit of Red Bull and some potential new tracks as well. Quite looking forward to this one.
Yeah, this should be really good. Something a little bit different as well, which I quite like, because these stories, they've been about, but nothing too crazy. So I'm really looking forward to, like you say, sinking our teeth.
Definitely, yeah. Sorry, I was listening to you there, Dan. Try not. Are you lifting your finger off push to talk quite quickly after you've spoken? Because it seems to be cutting you out at the end.
Okay. I might be. So
Pressure.
we can try that again. Yeah, exactly. Heart beating now. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, it was doing it the other day as well, but it then stopped it after a while, so I didn't know if it was something from your end. But anyway, let's move on. We'll kick things off by talking about Red Bull and their chances for 2019. Now, I covered it in Friday's news roundup, Dan. Red Bull have been massively vocal lately, haven't they, about how confident they are with this Honda engine, and they think that if they can deliver a decent engine next year with their chassis design the way it is, they could actually go on and make Max Verstappen F1's youngest ever world champion. Before we get into the proper nitty gritty of it, what are your initial reactions to that? Are you as confident as they are?
Probably not as confident as they are to the public. I would say. I'm sure behind closed doors they're not quite as confident, I'd guess. But you know what? It does look quite promising. You know, if you'd have asked me halfway through the season, I'd have gone, nah, I'm not really too sure. But over these past few Grand Prix, it's starting to look like it might work. So initial thoughts, yeah, I'm really intrigued with this one. For sure.
Yeah, I'm certainly more confident than I was when the deal was first announced. I think when it was first announced, I thought, I couldn't see them being much worse than they are now, even with Honda power and that chassis being so good. I thought they'd be able to at least be third. But with the way that they're sort of developing the engine, because they're throwing stuff at that Toro Rosso now to make sure that Honda engine is going to be okay for next year, they've kind of sort of got early testing almost, haven't they? So I'm a little bit more positive for them for next year. Whether or not I think they can go for the title, I'm not convinced. I'd like to. I mean, I'm sure you're the same, Dan. 3 teams up there fighting for the World Championship. Well,
Definitely.
10 teams fighting for the World Championship would be fantastic. But, I think the title maybe in their first season with Honda is a little bit of a stretch. But what concerns me about it, to be honest, is it does have all the makings of a McLaren Honda. They seem to be setting themselves up for quite a fall.
Yeah, that's the big question mark at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I don't think it'll be quite as bad as the McLaren situation. And I know if Jonty was here, he'd be saying that, Red Bull will work closely with Honda, whereas McLaren, it was a very fractured relationship almost straight away. So I'm more hopeful than the McLaren situation, but we shouldn't rule it out. We got to think back to 2015. Everyone thought, you know what? McLaren, give them at least a year just to settle in, and then they'll be right on the money. And you know what? I was that guy as well. Even that second season, I thought, you know what, this year, Honda, keep your eye on them. But it never quite happened. And this year does seem to be Honda's best year. But I think you're right. You really can't discount that this has a huge potential to all completely go wrong.
I think that's the concern, isn't it? I mean, when you look at the development that Honda made under McLaren, they never really, even when they got it right, they kind of started to move forward in 2016, but then fell back again in 2017. But what Red Bull are saying they're going to do differently is they're kind of saying to Honda, build the engine, we will make our car fit it. Whereas apparently McLaren was saying, we've built the car, you make the engine fit it. So that could really play to their strengths. But that Red Bull is so tightly packaged, and if that Honda has any kind of overheating issues, they're going to really struggle next year. I mean, we saw with McLaren in winter testing with Renault, didn't we? The burn marks on the side, I think it was Stoffel Van Dorn's McLaren, how badly these cars can overheat. So they've got to get this aero right, Red Bull, and I'm a little bit concerned that they're not going to be as, lenient, if you like, with Honda as perhaps they're making out. I worry they are going to sort of say to us or to the public, we are building this car. As long as the Honda engine fits, we're happy. We'll change the back end if we need to. But I can't help but feel that behind closed doors, Adrian Newey is saying, right, Honda, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and I want you to do the other. And that really could properly screw them over in the end.
Yeah, it could. And like you say, Adrian Newey is a big player in all this. I mean, if you're Honda, yes, you want to put in the best engine. But if Adrian Newey's telling you, this just isn't going to work with our car, and this component, yes, it's going to make us go quicker, but it's going to screw something else up. I mean, it's a real challenge for both parties, really, to try and sort this out. But I think it could work. And I think Adrian Newey himself, he's been in this business a very long time now. He knows what he's doing. One of the best minds in Formula One. So I think if anyone's going to make that situation work in terms of aerodynamically and packing the car in, I think Adrian Newey's the man. So on that side of things, I'm quite optimistic, but it's just whether Honda can really put all the pieces together to make something really special.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the rule changes next year, haven't we, with Aero? So it surprises me that Red Bull have been quite so confident. I mean, we know they can build a very good chassis. They've proven that. And Christian Horner has pretty much religiously said if they can get to sort of half a second off Mercedes and Ferrari in terms of the Honda power, then their chassis should make up the rest. We saw that in Mexico, didn't we, when the engines were sort of leveled out a little bit more because of the altitude. But I think to come out sort of bigging yourself up in November, just before a whopping great, well, not a whopping great rule change, but a fairly significant rule change, when you look at what happened with McLaren, I think it's a dangerous game to play, and I'm a little bit concerned that they're setting the bar a little bit too high, if you know what I mean. Sort of, if they'd have said, I think we'll be third next year, we'll go for second, but I think third is probably where we'll end up. And then if they go on and do fight for the championship, everyone's going to go, wow, what a season. Whereas now, I'm going to look at the end of 2019, if they're miles off in third place and just clinging on to it, I'm going to turn around and say, well, that's a poor season based on what they told us they were looking for. Same with McLaren, when they were sort of giving it all this, we will challenge for wins in 2018 when they switched to Renault, or we'd be challenging Red Bull for podiums at least and going for third in the championship. And had they done that, you'd say, yep, they've hit their target. But because they came in and went all out with that, they've had a terrible season as far as I'm concerned. Whereas if they've been modest, I think that's the word I'm looking for, come in with a bit of modesty and aim realistically rather than setting that bar too high.
Yeah, I think you're perfectly right there. That was very well put.
Thank you.
Well, it was. I mean, if you got your sensible head screwed on, shouting to the hills that you're going to be fighting for the world championship is a crazy thing to do anyway in Formula One. Even if they stayed with Renault, that would have been a crazy assumption to make. So to make it with all these new potential issues coming in, brand new partners, it seems like a crazy statement. They've got the driver to do it. I think Verstappen is definitely one of the best on the grid and is more than capable of doing it, even in maybe a slightly subpar car. But I mean, compared to the Mercedes and Ferrari, that is. But to claim that you're going to make this almost a second jump is crazy. And yes, at Mexico, they were right up there with the chassis. In Monaco, they're right up there. At Singapore, they're right up there. But you think at tracks like Monza, that's a hell of a lot of time you've got to make up just with a slight aero change and with a brand new engine. That's a hell of a lot of time you've got to be making up. So it's a dangerous game they're playing, Red Bull, but they don't mind doing it sometimes. So it's a complete guessing game. It really is. But to say they're going to be fighting in the World Championship next year, unfortunately, sounds great, but I really don't think it's going to happen.
See, Haley's taken my 25-minute statement there and turned it into two very, very nice short sentences. So, hello, Haley, by the way. She says, in the end, just keep expectations low. Don't pull a McLaren this year and say they can fight. Keep expectations low, and then everyone will be surprised and happy. That's the thing, is it? I know Red Bull have got to keep sponsors happy. I mean, you have to look at it from a business perspective. If Red Bull turn around and go, yeah, we'll be 7th next year, sponsors aren't going to be overly pleased with that. So they've got to aim a little bit high, but don't go crazy with expectations. But at the same time, hope I'm wrong. I really do. And of course, that is going to now trigger the Red Bull Verstappen fanboy comments. But as I said a little bit earlier in the stream, I want as many teams up there fighting for races and championships as possible. Look how good Mexico was with Red Bull in the mix there, and Baku and Singapore before they crashed obviously in Baku, but getting them in the mix, and it just adds that extra element of surprise, if that makes sense. That sort of added something to a weekend rather than, it'll be a Ferrari or Mercedes on pole and one of them will win it. So we want as many up there as possible fighting. But 2019 to me seems way too early for Red Bull and Honda. Yes, they're working with Toro Rosso, but that engine has not been in the back, as far as I'm aware, of this year's Red Bull at any point.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't think it has either.
So it's kind of like, I guess the point I'm making is, it's one thing saying this is what it's doing in the Toro Rosso, this is what it's doing on the bench, completely different to this is what it'll do in the back of our car. That Toro Rosso is a very nicely packaged car, but nowhere near as aggressive as Red Bull will want to go next year, and will have to go if they want their chassis to be the difference.
Yeah, and it's a completely different team working on the car. I know Toro Rosso and Red Bull are very closely linked, but I think the actual jump it will take going from a Renault to Honda engine won't be as smooth a transition as maybe it looks at the moment. So, like I say, you got to look at it from all perspectives. And I think with all the different variabilities going on next year, even with a brand new driver coming into the team with Gasly, we still have no idea if he's going to be straight on the pace straight away, if he's going to be struggling. And if they're talking about a team's championship, then you've got to know all your variables, and they really don't at the moment. So 2019, like you say, it would be great to see 6 different winners. It really would. I'm not too confident. And third in the constructors, I think, like yourself and Haley say, I think that's the safer option to say publicly. And I think as well, if they were going to fight for the title, it's a more pleasant surprise for the fans. So, like I said, I really hope they can do it. It's just whether Honda, it all matches together.
Yeah, who's that in chat just there? I think it was, let's have a look. MB Killers Mason Baxter says, if I remember, Sean, you even said that if Red Bull had a Mercedes power unit, they wouldn't be 2 minutes up the road. I think 2 minutes would be a bit of an exaggeration, but if you put a Mercedes in that Red Bull, they'd be champions this year, comfortably.
Yeah, and I think as well, strategically speaking, they've been the far superior team. Mercedes have made a few mistakes this year. Ferrari have made numerous mistakes this year. So, yeah, I think it's a very safe guess to say that they'd be at the front. I really would.
I think as well, when you look at the top 3 in the championship, you look at where they are third, they're not... The gap for me back to Renault is way too big to close in one season. But then equally, I think the gap to Mercedes at the top is way too big to close in one season. So I'm not convinced they're going to be title challengers. I do think Max Verstappen will win races next year. I think places like Monaco, they should be strong. Possibly Singapore as well, you'd expect. Mexico as well. And I think if he's going to be strong on those weekends, that gives Gasly an opportunity, particularly towards the second half of the season. I'm not sure if Monaco might be a little bit early for him in the season with him sort of settling into the team, but certainly when we get to the second half of the year and after the summer break, he could challenge for a win. So I genuinely do believe that Red Bull will pick up wins next year. And I think 6 different winners, maybe contrary to what you're saying, Dan, I think it's genuinely possible.
Oh, that's how... I'd love to say it. I don't see Red Bull winning next year.
Really?
I don't. And I just, even though like this weekend in Mexico, or last weekend it is now, but in Mexico, they were so strong. I just don't see it happening. I really don't. I think, and I don't even think that's because I think Honda will be a step back. I just think Mercedes and Ferrari will go another step forward. I really do. Ferrari are going to step up their game next year. 100% they will. They've made so many mistakes this year. That's 2 years now on the bounce where arguably their mistakes and Vettel's mistakes have cost them the world championship. I don't see that happening 3 times in a row, although I didn't see it happening 2 times in a row. So, yeah, but I don't see it happening 3 times in a row. And I think next year's championship will go right down to the wire with Leclerc, Vettel, Hamilton, and I think Bottas as well. I think he's learned a lot this year. But Red Bull, I think it's too big of a hurdle to catch up with those guys. But like you say, I think they'll be a comfortable third. Just not the race wins. I just can't see it, unfortunately, although it would be great.
Okay, then, sticking with that topic sort of then, and maybe playing a little bit devil's advocate. You know how I like to do it, Dan. I like to throw these out there.
Nice and spicy.
Do you think it's more likely that Leclerc will become F1's youngest world champion next year?
Oh, okay. Right. I don't want to become a Leclerc fanboy, but it's going to sound like it because I do. Yeah, I do. I think he's got a real chance next year. And I've said this before. If I was going to put money on it, I think he could beat Vettel. I really do. I think Vettel's not done himself any favors this year, and I think maybe this is probably a bit contradictory to what I just said, but I think that pressure's going to keep mounting on him, and I think Leclerc very quickly will be the star man in that team. And yeah, I think if I was really going to definitively say between Verstappen or Leclerc as youngest world champion, I'd go Leclerc. I really don't see Red Bull catching up with Mercedes or Ferrari anytime soon. Maybe 2021, I'd guess. But to say that Honda is going to make a big enough jump, I don't see. Maybe that Red Bull chassis next year is going to be out of this world like we know it can be. But yeah, I think Leclerc, with that Ferrari team behind him, I think that's the package.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Gasly versus Verstappen. I cannot wait to see Ricciardo versus Hulkenberg. I think they are two great scraps. But the one I'm really looking forward to is Leclerc Vettel, because if you look at this season and last season and the pressure that Mercedes and Hamilton put on Ferrari and Vettel respectively, if you like, that's without, as good as Kimi has been this season, that's without any real pressure from his teammate. If Leclerc comes in next year and is, as many are saying around Ferrari, and as he's saying, is not going to come in as number 2 and will be allowed to fight Vettel, that's his teammate. If he's on pace with him, putting even more pressure on him, and that will be very interesting to watch. And it does feel a little bit like, and particularly if, like I say, Leclerc does turn up in Australia, maybe that's a bit optimistic, maybe sort of after 4 or 5 races, gets on the pace of Vettel, it's going to have a real feel if Vettel starts to struggle again and maybe make these mistakes and come under this pressure, like the changing of the guard at Ferrari. It's a massive year next year for Ferrari, huge for Vettel as well.
Yeah, and you think about it, this is the first time since 2014 Vettel's had a real sort of young gun challenger as a teammate. I mean, Raikkonen, he's been pretty good this year. You know, I don't want to be harsh to him because I do love a bit of Kimi. I think we all do, but he hasn't been great since Vettel's come to the team. This year's definitely been his strongest year, but still he's been outclassed by Vettel. This is Vettel's first big challenge with Ferrari within his own team, so it's a completely different ball game. I expect Leclerc to be up there with him. And I think you mentioned Hulkenberg and Ricciardo. I think almost every team on the grid I'm going to be interested in next year. No matter, even though we haven't fully confirmed all the seats, almost every single team up and down the grid, there's some sort of story which is going to make it extra spicy to watch next year. And it's things like that in Formula One which makes it so great. But you even look at all the rookies coming in from Formula 2, Norris versus Sainz. That's going to be a really interesting one. See if McLaren can get further up. You've got Russell with whoever he's going to be with. You've got potentially Albon coming in. All sorts of stories up and down the grid. So I'm looking forward to every single team pretty much next year. And I think you're right. Verstappen and Gasly is going to be a really close one and a really exciting one.
When was the last time we had sort of this anticipation over all these changes in the grid? I'm just trying to think, because it's been a while since we've had this much of a mix-up and these big changes. I mean, if Ricciardo had stayed at Red Bull, I don't think we'd have seen half the changes we've seen at all. It's going to be really fascinating next year to see some of these battles. You know, who's going to go alongside Kvyat? Looks like it's going to be Albon. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, we've still got 2 races in 2018. I suppose the Constructors' Championship is still up for grabs, maybe clutching at straws a little bit. But, you know, next year's going to get really, really interesting and tasty. I know you liked that word last week. It's going to get nice and tasty next year with some of these. And when you think Gasly, he's got a point to prove against Verstappen, who's established that team. Leclerc's got a point to prove. Ricciardo's new to Renault, so Hulkenberg's going to want to put him in his place, and Ricciardo's going to want to stake a claim. Can't wait. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. But we'll summarise this very, very quickly. Do we think Max Verstappen can be world champion next year, or are Red Bull and Honda just trying to big up their chances in typical McLaren style almost?
Yeah, And I don't see it happening. I really don't. And it is a bit too similar to the McLaren sort of story, which, like I said earlier, we all sort of believed at the time. And I'm not going to fall for the same trick twice, unfortunately. So, no, I don't think it is going to happen.
No, I want them up there because I want three teams fighting, but I think it will be between Mercedes and Ferrari next year. I'm not going to make any predictions on the champion. I know a few of you have been asking me to do my 2019 predictions now. No way am I doing that before preseason testing. The only thing I got right in the predictions I did last January, Dan, which was obviously well before preseason testing, was that Toro Rosso would not be anywhere near as bad as they were and would be in and around where they were last season, and that's pretty much exactly where they are. So a couple of places down at the moment, but that's all I got right. So no predictions until we get to the start of March.
I made the same mistake. I did mine before preseason testing and absolutely nothing pretty much was correct. So yeah, I think I'm going to follow suit there and do them at least during maybe testing, but definitely not.
But actually, having said that, even so, testing, Mercedes were apparently a second clear of the field. Ferrari were third fastest and Red Bull looked like they could fight for the championship, and that all didn't really work out in the end, did it?
Yeah, true. So it's like we always say on a Friday, you should never trust testing. So, look, I mean, it's a bit too early to make predictions fully, but no, I don't see it happening for Red Bull.
Let's move on then to tracks. We've got a couple of new tracks for 2020, Dan, apparently on the old F1 grapevine. Vietnam and Zandvoort have been put forward as possible Grand Prix. Vietnam has made apparently a big step towards joining the calendar for 2020. It's been rumoured for quite a while now, to be honest, but the People's Committee, I believe they're called, of Hanoi, plan to issue an invitation to F1 allegedly as early as next week to launch a street circuit and a race capable of hosting F1 in 2020. There was a statement that came out. I've got a nice little quote here, and now you all love a quote, really. It says, the city of Hanoi managed to conclude the cooperation to be entitled as the official host of a race of the FIA Formula One World Championship from April 2020. This is something that's been doing the rounds for at least 2 years now, maybe 3. It was something, I think it was Bernie Ecclestone had previously stated that it was kind of one of his final acts before selling F1 to Liberty, that he was to land the deal with Vietnam, which was going to pocket them something around $50 million or something like that. So it's something that's been going around for quite a while now. Street circuit, and I believe part purpose built as well, or something that's going to be built sort of for the F1. I'm quite looking forward to the prospect of a race in Vietnam, if I'm being completely honest, Dan. It's from what I've never been, I'd love to go, but from what I've seen on sort of vlogs on YouTube and stuff, it looks like a beautiful country, and it'd be great to expand the market even further in Asia.
Yeah, exactly. And especially because there's all this talk of expanding in the US, and I am all for that as well. But some of these, I don't want to, no disrespect here, but lesser known countries maybe in Asia, some of these countries that you wouldn't expect Formula One to go to, I think is exactly what Formula One should be doing. And I'm going to have to say it again, something that Formula E have done so well is expanding in these markets that don't really get a lot of motorsport and things like that. Obviously, there is then the question, will, I suppose, the local people get behind it, because that's a huge question mark, especially for a street circuit. But initially, in first thoughts, it looks like a really good opportunity and something that, like you said, would be a fantastic one to go to.
I couldn't find any proposed layouts for it or anything like that official. There were a couple on Twitter that people have put forward, but I couldn't get any permission from them to use their pictures. I didn't want to get into trouble. But they look interesting, but the problem is it looks very 90 left, 90 right, and that's a typical street circuit, which, you know, with respect, is fine for something like Formula E, but for Formula One it doesn't work because overtaking is so difficult anyway. So I'm not a big fan of the current proposed or the layouts that people are putting forward. Hopefully they'll come up with something a little bit better, but I come to what you say there about it being sort of the lesser known countries and how important it is to get out there, like they did almost to South Korea, not necessarily a lesser known country, but maybe not a well-known F1 audience. And that circuit was fantastic, and we got some great races on that track, but the crowds never turned up. Obviously it was in the middle of nowhere, so that's a big difference to being a street circuit, but they need to make sure the crowds are in for this, and they need to go out there and say, do you want Formula One here, to the people of Vietnam? Because if they turn around and say, Formula what? Then there's absolutely no point going there. Yes, it'll raise the appeal, but if no one's going to turn up, then there's no point. But Vietnam, I always find, and I think I've always said this, but I think this is also a line in Top Gear or something like that at some point. To a lot of people, Vietnam is a war. but it's
Yeah.
actually a country, a very, very beautiful country. And I think it'd be fantastic to get F1 there and really, like I've already said, expand the range, get a few more people interested in Formula One. The problem I've got though, Dan, is if we start bringing Vietnam in, and we'll talk about Zandvoort a little bit more in a minute, but start bringing them in as well, we're going to start losing some of these really big historic tracks. Silverstone still don't have a deal. There's question marks over Monza. Hockenheim is very much seems to be sort of a year-on-year thing based on finances. They are really important classic tracks to Formula One that we really don't want to lose, but they're the ones that are kind of clinging on for dear life almost to stay on the calendar.
Yeah, and I mean, I loved Malaysia. I thought that was a great race, and I was
Yeah.
gutted to see that go. Although that was another one where the fans and the crowds didn't really turn up. So it's a huge question mark. I mean, Silverstone, obviously, the most attended race almost every year unanimously. That one would be. I'm probably this is slight biased as well because we're both British. But if that one was to go, that would be one of the biggest crimes ever in Formula One, and as well as the likes of Monza. I mean, if either of these two tracks are leaving, then that is just a huge disappointment. And I think that'll really get a lot of fans' backs up with Liberty Media. I mean, I'm really impressed with Liberty at the moment. I'm not going to lie. I think the majority of things they've done have been fantastic for the sport, but for things just as I suppose as silly as circuits that fans love, that's the sort of thing that, especially diehard F1 fans, that's really you're going to turn on Liberty if they're doing things like that. So I am personally of the view that keeping those tracks on the calendar is much more important than expanding to new markets. But at the same time, if it's tracks like Malaysia that have been on the calendar what seems like forever, if they're not getting the attendance, then is there any point keeping them on the calendar? So Liberty have got their head screwed on, but I just hope they've got themselves finally tuned into the fan base.
I would be very, very surprised if a deal isn't done to keep Silverstone.
Yeah,
I
I
really
agree.
do, because, and yeah, okay, fine. Maybe it's a little bit of bias because I can't be bothered to travel into Europe and I'd rather just drive down to Silverstone and watch the Grand Prix there. Maybe there's a little bit of that bias there, but the event itself and everything around it is always jam-packed with fans. And I think Liberty know that, and I think there'll be a deal done. But Hockenheim I'm less confident about. Monza, we really do need it, but they seem to be losing in terms of money. So whether that will go, I think if we lost Germany, as much as I enjoy the German Grand Prix and Hockenheim went, I don't think it would be as disastrous almost as if you lost Monza or Silverstone. It would still be bad not to have a German Grand Prix. I think you need to have a French Grand Prix, a German Grand Prix, a British Grand Prix, and an Italian Grand Prix because they are massive parts of F1 heritage. But then if we start doing that, you could easily go back and say, well, Imola was a huge part of F1 heritage. Shouldn't that be there? And maybe playing devil's advocate, even though I don't agree with the statements going to come out of my mouth, Dan, I don't know. Maybe it is time to let some of these older tracks go and bring these new generation circuits in and move F1 forward.
Yeah, and
I disagree.
yeah, I don't fully disagree. If I'm being totally honest, I don't fully disagree. There's got to be a limit of how many circuits we have, and one of the things I love about Formula One is the ever-changing calendar. I love it when a new track comes in. I think it's fantastic. Even this year with Paul Ricard, which fine was an okay race, quite an hallucinating race to be honest. But
Yeah, headache.
yeah, exactly. But it's great just the hype of a brand new circuit, and that's probably something a bit strange, but that's something that I particularly quite like to see. Although it's not great seeing obviously some fantastic circuits leave the calendar, it does open up a spot for a potentially better race. So I'm not fully against it, but I think you're right. There's some tracks. I mean, Monaco. If for me, Monaco's the one. If that went, then that would be, that'd be unforgivable. It really would. I think for me, Monza, Spa, and Silverstone would be the three. And I don't think there's probably any chance of those leaving. Even though, like you say, Silverstone, there's a chance it might, but I really think they will sort that out. I really do. But going back to Vietnam and Zandvoort, if they have the potential and have done in the past of showing some really fantastic racing, then why not go to these new circuits and old circuits? I mean, even Imola, like you said, if maybe Germany went, then maybe, or Monza, that's a chance to go back to Imola. So I'm not dead against it, but at the same time, they've they've got to be sensible about it and keep these great tracks.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Zandvoort, apparently there is an offer on the table from Liberty Media for them to host the race in 2020. And circuit owner Prince Bernhard said that if we sign now, the Netherlands will have a Grand Prix again in 2020. And others have said, and I'll quote them as well, with Max Verstappen, everyone is well aware that this is a unique opportunity. With all this hype around Verstappen, the fact that he's going to be around in F1 probably till he retires from Formula One, so at least another, 14, 15 years, possibly even more, it would be crazy for F1 not to try and cash in on that. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I think you know what I mean. Try and make some money from that and get that Verstappen hype and get a Dutch Grand Prix on the calendar for the same reason that they go to other places when you've got successful drivers. You look at the French Grand Prix, it disappeared for a while, but then all of a sudden we've got Grosjean and Ocon and Gasly, and suddenly let's go back to France. And it makes perfect sense commercially. So I think it'd be great. I love Zandvoort. It's proper. I think it used to be called. I think they used to refer to it as a quirky seaside track, sort of through the dunes, and it's just one of those that is just fun. Apparently, by the way, if you're interested, Dan, they'll be paying an annual race fee of roughly $22 million. So they're definitely up for it and willing to pay the money. So go for it, get it on the calendar. The other one, of course, is Miami. We'll talk about Zandvoort in a second. That apparently is less certain now, from what I've been reading today. Did a bit of digging on this one. So 24 races, highly unlikely now anyway, with a few not likely to get a deal. But apparently the question marks over Miami is that when the vote went through with the, what they called the Miami City Commission, I think they were called, something like that. Apparently they voted unanimously, that's a word, to indefinitely delay the F1 race contract negotiations. So Liberty really want this race in Miami, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen at the moment. So it could be that we get Zandvoort and Vietnam and then lose maybe Hockenheim or Silverstone, for example, end up with a 22 race calendar and Miami never turns up. But we'll go to Zandvoort because a lot of people in chat want to know what we think about that one. I would love to see Zandvoort back, Dan.
Yeah, and I think this is speaking on behalf of my channel here. No plugs, don't worry. But I know that the third largest region that watch my videos is actually the Netherlands.
Same.
I think about 10%. But yeah, 10% of my viewers are from the Netherlands, and that's a huge percentage. I mean, countries like Germany, I think, only have 1% on my channel. I mean, people really underestimate the size of the fan base in the Netherlands. Even though they're only a small country, they haven't had a top-tier driver for quite some time. They haven't had their own Grand Prix. They're still out there. And now we're seeing the Orange Army absolutely everywhere. I mean, even this year, they inherited Austria and Spa, as they do every year, as they're almost their own circuit. So I think it's time they get their own circuit. And I mean, I've never had the privilege of watching a race at Zandvoort, but if I take your opinion on board, which I trust your opinion just about.
I really wouldn't.
Okay. Well, I trust it just about. I think it'd be great to go there. And I think it's about time the Netherlands get a track. And even if it's not Zandvoort, just any circuit. I think they're a fan base that have waited a very long time for their own Grand Prix, and I think they deserve it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a good track as well. I think Charlie Whiting, I believe it was Charlie Whiting, said that minimal work would need to be done to sort of bring it up to scratch. So I think it's something that would be worth the investment both for Formula One and for Zandvoort themselves. They could make a pretty penny with all this Verstappen hype. And obviously, Nick de Vries is Dutch, isn't he?
Yeah.
So if he makes it to the grid as well, they really should get a Dutch Grand Prix. And 2020 seems about right, as well as, Zandvoort's sort of already pretty much there, just a few tweaks. Maybe they'll change some layout, extend it, I don't know. We'll see nearer the time. But I'd like to see that. Vietnam will be great as well. But Miami, I hated that circuit layout when I saw the proposal. I don't think it's been revised too much. I think it got changed a little bit because of some feedback. But I just don't see Miami happening. I really don't. And I don't... the people of Miami weren't keen on the idea that, they obviously like, some of them will like F1, but they weren't overly keen on it. The commission didn't want it to go through. I'm just be very, very surprised if it stays or if it arrives on the calendar in 2020.
Yeah, and I think as well, I actually don't think the fan base were completely won over by it. I think when they advertised the Miami Grand Prix, I think they expected almost a unanimous praise from the fans, but I don't think it was. And I think especially once they released that, let's say, let's try and put it in a nice way, subpar circuit layout, we'll say, I think that really put fans off. It was a very, 90-degree corners almost and straights. I mean, it's almost as if they just picked a few sort of roads. Oh, that's a long road. We'll put them along there. And yes, it's great just to say, we've got a race in Miami. But if it's going to be Well, if that's just going to be it, and the racing's just going to be you qualify and you stay in position with maybe a pit stop, then it's not really worth it. And I think, like you say earlier, it almost was like a Formula E circuit. It really was. And I know Formula E have raced there before, but I know I watched that race and I wasn't even a big fan when it was in Formula E. So, look, I think it's great saying that we're going to all these fancy and luxurious places, but if the racing's not great, then what's the real point? If the fans aren't fully behind it, if the people and the local government, wow, the commission aren't behind it, then what's the real point? There's plenty of other places in America that they could race. And I'm sure Liberty are going to push for at least another 2 US Grand Prix. Whether that actually happens or not, I don't know. But I don't think this Miami thing's happening for quite some time. And I think you're right, 2020, I don't see this race being on the circuit. I really don't. I wouldn't completely rule it out indefinitely, but for 2020, I don't see it happening.
There seems for me to be too many hurdles to overcome, but also look, maybe this is a debate for another day. I think because if we had Jonty on, we'd ramble on about like this, like two miserable old men all afternoon, Dan. But for me, if Liberty, it's the conflicting of what Liberty are saying, the confliction in there. We want to take this to the fans as they go with street circuits. That makes sense. Then they say we want this sport to be about entertainment, about overtaking. We want action. We want drama. So let's put it on a street circuit. Street circuits don't work for overtaking. All right, Singapore, there's a couple of spots. Monaco, if you're ridiculously brave, even with his wide cars, you can try. But as we saw, Daniel Ricciardo, Red Bull, his car basically dying over the course of the Grand Prix. He's got two much faster cars behind him that can't overtake him because of the way it is. Street circuits don't work, and that's that. You know, they might work somewhere like, we'll say it again, Formula E, where the cars are narrower. And they are, I think, from what I've seen of Formula E, their street tracks are much wider than, say, Monaco, probably as wide as some parts of Singapore. That's fine. But if we just end up with a load of Monacos and bodge job circuits like Sochi, it's not going to be worth people's time to not only pay the money to watch it on TV, but to pay the money to go and watch it at the racetrack. And if you want to tap into an American market, as you've kind of touched on there, Dan, go to one of the many already purpose-built racetracks around America that are some of the best in the world.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, street circuits, like you say, unfortunately, in this day and age, they're really not working. And Monaco now is almost more of the spectacle rather than the actual racing, which is a big shame. Singapore, for me, is not really pushing any buttons anymore. It's slowly becoming one of my less favourite tracks. That being said, I think tracks like, I suppose, Australia, which some people regard as a street circuit, quote unquote, if it's going to be those sort of street circuits, maybe I'd be a little bit more lenient. I know in the past couple of years, that track again as well hasn't been the best for overtaking, but it's got some opportunities. So I don't want to poo-poo every street circuit, but at the same time, circuit layout is a huge thing. And that Miami race looked very similar to a sort of, well, a Singapore.
Yeah.
But then I suppose Azerbaijan does as well. And we've seen some great racing there. But even Azerbaijan, I'm not even too sure if that's a couple of fluky races we've had, because that first ever race we had was awful.
I was going to say that a few people in chat throwing Baku at me and saying that gives us great racing. 2016 was dire, absolutely dire, terrible Grand Prix. And Baku's great when we get collisions, when we get a safety car. If that race was run with no safety car, you'd just get 2016 over and over. I will concede out of the newer street tracks, because I don't think Singapore's all that. I think the problem with Singapore is that's about a bit like Monaco. Monaco's about the glitz and glamour. Singapore is about being a night race. I think that's what Singapore is. I don't think it's all that. Baku is one of the better ones we've got, but because it's wider, because we've got that long straight, and because you've got cars out of position because of safety cars and collisions, if you just have a straight race, no safety cars, no incidents, you're not going to get an awful lot of overtaking in Baku outside of the midfield, to be perfectly frank. So I think we would end up with another 2016. But again, I will concede it's better than some of those we've had lately. But just, there's so many tracks in the world to use. But we're not going to ramble about that, Dan. We could go on about all this all night. Things like Laguna Seca would be fantastic, is one that keeps cropping up. Some say in Watkins Glen. I don't know if that'd be any good for F1, modern day F1, but then, you know, some people would argue Zandvoort isn't, and they need to make tweaks. So there's plenty of circuits out there. I'm sure in chat you'll let me know some more, and in the comment section when this goes up as well. So plenty of tracks out there. Do let us know where you'd like to see F1 go in future as well. But yeah, I think we'll move on from that one, Dan. I think it's time to probably move on to some questions in just a moment and take some of those questions, got some awesome answers. Maybe not quite as Halloween-y as we did in midweek. God, that was a stream and a half, wasn't it?
That was a lot of fun. I hope everyone in chat enjoyed that one as well, because I definitely had a lot of fun. I think you and John.
Yeah, I don't really. Yeah, let's move. Christmas will be great. We'll do a similar one for Christmas, but they're a bit long, and I think people don't like the longer streams. But I'm just going to do, before we go into any questions, start popping question chat, and I'll scroll back to get some more. I'm going to give you a little bit of a channel update, I suppose, is what I'm doing now. Don't worry, it won't be too long. I'll do a proper one when the season's over, as I'm sure Dan will for his as well. Once the season's over, I'll let you all know that we're not disappearing for the winter. Please don't abandon us. We'll still be here. But for next week, we've got something new that we're going to be trying out. So there's a little bit of change to the race week build up. So on Tuesday, as is always the case with a pre-race week, will be the news roundup. I know we only had one on Friday, but it's the only way to really get it in on a race week, and I try to do one a week. The weekend warm-up will move to Wednesday at 4 p.m. UK time, and then on Thursday, yes, I can't wait for this, and neither can Jonty. I need to talk to you afterwards as well, Dan, so don't disappear when the stream's finished, mate. Thursday, we're going to start Throwback Thursday with a classic F1 race watch-along. Yes, I did tease that on Twitter yesterday. That's going to be at 7 p.m. UK time. And a poll for that with 4 races will go up on YouTube tomorrow. And you'll be able to pick the one you want us to watch with you guys on Thursday. So a bit of Throwback Thursday, a bit of reminiscing. Dan, that sounds terrifying.
I think that sounds great. And I think especially for fans, I suppose, like myself and even younger, for some of the very historic races, no offense there, man. No offense. But for some of the more historic races, that's going to be a lot of fun. So I think you've really smashed it there.
Well, I said to Jonty earlier, I think it'd be cool to get you involved in some of them as well, so that we can be like two old men teaching you about Formula One pre-2012. Like, this is what they used to get up to in the old days. Like, it'd be brilliant fun just to do. And then over the weekend, it's just going to be all the usual content. I am going to bring back the race watch along on Sunday as well for the last 2 races of the season. It was only disappearing, really. People think I've abandoned it, but it was only ever disappearing for the US and Mexico because they were just difficult times. But the race watch along, possibly the qualifying watch along, dependent on what time I get home on Saturday as well. So loads of content over the weekend. And don't forget that classic race watch along on Thursday. So make sure that you sub to the channel and you don't miss the poll that goes up tomorrow in the community tab, which I'm making way too much use of here on YouTube, so you can get your vote in as well. I'm trying to think of what we picked, but I can't remember. I think the 2007 European Grand Prix is on the list, but I will put those 4 up for you to vote on tomorrow and let you know on Wednesday what we're doing. But yeah, should we take some questions, Dan, rather than me sat here rambling on about what I will and won't do in the future?
That sounds brilliant, mate. That sounds brilliant. I'm hoping for some really great questions today. They're usually brilliant, but I reckon today they're going to.
I think we're going to get a few on circuits definitely here. A couple asking for Friday. I can't do Friday. Change your name to Walker, lol. Okay. There we go. A few people very happy with the race watch long idea on Thursday. Just something no one can break the Winkle Rock. I knew that was coming. Fantastic. What is your opinion on the fact Rich Energy have no money and are currently being sued, says Robert McPhee. Straight in there, Robert, with that one. I think we said this last Friday, didn't we, Dan, or the Friday before? I don't trust Rich Energy at all.
Yeah, slightly shady, something's obviously not quite right there. Something's not obviously 100% legit going on there. So I think you mentioned a couple of weeks back, you wouldn't be surprised if they didn't show up at all. So at this point, I'm not even too sure myself, to be honest.
I kind of get the feeling that they might rock up mid-season with, or Haas might turn up and sort of go to Rich Energy. Have you got our money you promised us? And I'm a little bit concerned it's not going to turn up. I hope I'm wrong, because it'd be great to get another sponsor on the grid. I mean, we talked about it the other Friday, didn't we? And it'd just be great to get another sponsor in F1, because we seem to be lacking sponsors. Even on the big teams, they don't seem to be the sponsors we had once upon a time. You know, the cars, you could barely see the Ferrari red because of all the sponsors plastered all over it, you know, that sort of thing. So definitely worse than it used to be. So where am I supposed to watch historic races, says Ghost Gaming. F1 TV, they've got an archive on there. There's loads on YouTube. Don't worry, we'll sort out links and things in the chat and whatnot for you on Thursday. We're currently looking for some others as well, so don't worry. We'll find you a stream somewhere, and I'm sure ST will have some dodgy stream from some dark place on the internet for everyone to watch. Next season, is Leclerc a genuine championship contender, says Mr. Mineral is trash. I want him to be. And, that's Q fanboy alert. I did the room tour on on Wednesday and I've got a Leclerc picture on the wall, so that'll start. But yeah, I think he can be, but it's all going to come down to how well he settles in, as we were saying earlier at the start of the season. If he can get on that pace of Vettel 3-4 races into the season, he's got a great chance, because that Ferrari, I think they will make another step forward. We've seen over the last couple of seasons, haven't we, Dan, that they're just making these strides forward. And I think he's got a chance. You can't write him off in at worst, the second fastest car on the grid.
Yeah, I think he's going to be right in there. And I know I keep saying this at the moment, but I'm really optimistic about it. I really am. I think we saw this year, it took a couple of races just to get used to Formula One, just to catch up with Marcus Ericsson. All of a sudden, Azerbaijan had that one incredible race, and since then has pushed on and on and on. And he's really been the star in that midfield this year. I think that's very fair to say. And I think next year in the Ferrari, like you say, he might take a couple of races just to really just sort of embed himself within that team. But I think maybe by Spain, he's going to be right there with Vettel. So I would definitely not count him out. And I think it's definitely going to be a contender.
I don't think he'll go in as number 2 either. I don't think Ferrari are doing that with him. If they wanted to keep, and this is going to sound really disrespectful, I don't mean it to be, but if they wanted to have a number 2 driver, they'd just keep a Raikkonen on. Or something like that, or go and get a Perez, or, sorry Dan, a Grosjean. Seriously, genuinely, they'd go and get somebody like that to play second fiddle to him. I think they genuinely see the future in Leclerc and they'll let him race. I mean, we might end up in a situation where Vettel's maybe marginally ahead in the championship and then maybe play some team orders, but I don't think it's going to be Barrichello, Schumacher or Irvine Schumacher at all.
Yeah, I think this could be one of the closest inter-Ferrari team like battles that we've seen for a very long time. I think that's very fair to say. I mean, especially since I've been watching Formula One, there's always been a definitive number one. I think maybe this is the first time ever. Maybe 2000 Massa, maybe that was the last time. I mean, since then, it's been a definitive number one. So even the fight with Mercedes is going to be great, but the fight within Ferrari, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it, very much looking forward to it. I did see a question on Valtteri Bottas that I wanted to answer, and now I can't find it, which is absolutely typical. There we go. It's Alex, says, if Bottas doesn't show up in 2019, do you think Mercedes will boot him? Now, there were some reports not long ago that Mercedes, or I say reports, there were some dodgy articles on the internet somewhere, rumours is probably the people trying to stir the pot and have some fun, who said that if Bottas, that they were considering dropping Bottas at the end of this season and bringing Ocon in for next year. That's rubbish. There's no way they're going to do that. That is just paper talk, trying to get people to click on links and sell their magazines and whatnot, but you know what people are like. But he's got to perform next year, because if they've got a driver like Esteban Ocon waiting in the wings that they rate so highly, he's going to have to step up or he's going to step in and take his place. But I think that's already a done deal. If you listen to Toto Wolff and the lines he's come out with in the last couple of weeks, Dan, things like he will be guaranteed to be in a good car in 2020, that says to me the decision's been taken.
Yeah, I really hope Bottas can deliver, because I think the pace we saw at Williams was... well, his potential was so high. And when he came to Mercedes, yes, we didn't think he'd quite be on Hamilton's level, but I still don't think we've seen the best of Bottas in this Mercedes car. And I think maybe early on in the season, he had some chances, but reliability and different external factors really didn't help him. So I hope that he can do well, because I don't want to say I'm a big fan of Bottas, but I like the guy. And I think he's definitely been a great teammate to Hamilton. But I think with Ocon waiting, I think with Russell coming in as well, I don't want to count out George Russell, because he could be a megastar in that Williams. He's been great in Formula 2 this year. So why he won't be able to push on in maybe a midfield fight in Williams, then I think Bottas is going to really have to pull out all the stops. He's definitely going to have to make a big jump in performance if he wants to keep that seat over the likes of Ocon and Russell.
Do you think Bottas gets a lot of unnecessary stick? I feel like he does, because I think he's a good driver. We saw at the start of the season, if his luck had been the other way, if his luck had gone for him, he would have been right in that title fight for a hell of a lot longer, maybe even with the confidence that would bring. pushing for the title itself. Big ask against the likes of Hamilton and Vettel, but, he's not a million miles off second place in the championship, really, when you consider the bad luck he's had. You look at Baku, for example, the safety car in China. Maybe if he got that move done in Bahrain, things would look very different. I just think he gets a lot of stick. And I know I've given him stick for that thing in Bahrain, because I still think he should have sent it on Vettel that early in the season. Throw it up the inside, it's not going to destroy your season that early on. But I think he gets too much stick, and people sort of say that he's a crap driver, but look at how far off his teammate he is. Yeah, but that's Lewis Hamilton. That's like saying, look how far Eddie Irvine was of Michael Schumacher. Do you know what I mean? Of course he was. It's Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he does get a lot of unnecessary hate. And I think especially at this time of the year where the last few races haven't been great, I think it's such a shame, because I really do think he started off the season really well. And those first, I suppose, 3 or 4 races before Hamilton even picked up a win, Hamilton was shaky, and Bottas was right there, like you say, fighting for the win in Bahrain, in China, in Azerbaijan. He's been a bit unlucky at the beginning of the year, but like I say, since that team radio call in Germany, he seems to have just completely dropped off. And whether that's confidence, whether that's just within the team, we don't really know. But for sure, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him next year, and I hope he can deliver.
I hope so as well. I hope you can't hear those fireworks. The neighbours are going absolutely crazy. I hope they're fireworks. Maybe we should be calling the police. But anyway, let's not get into that one. I don't live in a dodgy area. It's okay. Let's have a look at a couple more questions. A few of you asking me about Vettel, but I kind of want to save what I want to say for a future video I've got planned. Did Dan just say midfield Williams? Yeah, Williams used to be in the midfield once upon a time. Seems like forever. It was actually only last season, really, wasn't it? But it does seem like forever ago that Williams have been. What did you make of David Coulthard's comments, by the way, if you've seen them, saying, I think I've put it on here somewhere, saying something along the lines of he's very disappointed in them and McLaren. Let me see if I can find this article on here.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, he described McLaren and Williams as confusing and disappointing. Yes.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with those statements.
Let's have a look. So we've got, I just saw one on Kimi as well. You live in Lincolnshire, it's all dodgy. Shush, Thomas, shush. Ryan says, Kimi at Sauber performance. What do we reckon for next year? I think if Sauber keep developing the way they have this year, Dan, with that extra money that's going to come from Alpha that obviously they got for this season, but obviously won't have really been able to do much with until 2019, I think they could be in that fight with... Maybe 4th is possibly a bit of a push, but I think they could be in that mix with maybe Force India. If Williams step up and get in there somewhere, that'd be good. I think we've got a very tasty, I know you like that word, tasty midfield for next year. And I think Sauber can be right in there. And with Kimi Räikkönen's experience, he's going to be able to develop that car better, help the setup for like Giovinazzi, for example. I think they'll do very, very well. And maybe if we get a crazy race, he might be able to sneak a podium. I'd be stunned. But, crazy race, we're talking maybe a Baku 2017 situation. He could do it, but... I think he'll do better than someone predicted. I think people think he's gone there to retire quietly. I think he's going to be, it's hard to say impressive, but impressive for what will basically be now a midfield drive for him.
Yeah, and just hearing you talk about them potentially getting 4th, and I'm thinking, but what about Renault? What about Force India? What about McLaren? I think this midfield is going to be so close next year. I'm even trying to think in my head who's going to be the back markers, or even the team in 9th. Because you think, maybe
the back markers.
Well, yeah, but 9th though, who's going to be 9th? Because Toro Rosso, you think, that's another year with Honda, McLaren. Are they going to make that jump forward? It's going to be great, and I think, like I say, Räikkönen. I don't think Sauber will be that far down, but then again, like I said, it's going to be so close. I'm just so excited. And I think Räikkönen. We've not seen the last of Räikkönen. I think he will pull out some stellar performances.
Ryan Freeman is asking this one. Okay, this isn't me. He says, do you think that Grosjean is going to make similar mistakes next year? Dan, that is all you, mate. Yeah.
I mean, of course he is. He's Grosjean. That's why I like him.
That's why you love him.
Yeah. No, we'll move on. I think he will. Yeah, I think he will, unfortunately. And I think it could potentially be his last year, which pains me to say, but... I think it'll be after 2019. I think it'll be a Formula E drive unfortunately.
There you go. You heard it here first. Grosjean's number one and only fan says that he's going to be gone at the end of next season. And Kai Peterson says, will Kvyat mess up a 3rd time? No. I think if you listen to what Toro Rosso say? I mean, of course they're going to say nice things because they were desperate for a driver. But I think he'll surprise. I don't think we're talking. I've always said about Kvyat, I don't think he's ever been world championship material, not by a mile. I don't think he's picked up podiums, but I don't think in a midfield car like, say, Perez, I don't think he'd be able to put a car on the podium. But I do think he'd be a solid midfield driver, and he's kind of what Toro Rosso need in a way. He's going to bring a little bit of experience, not a huge amount, but he's going to bring some experience. He's had a year at Ferrari as well to kind of grow up. So I think he'll be all right. Don't expect miracles. Don't expect him to be, the next big thing again and Red Bull start bigging it up too much. And also don't be surprised if somebody like Mick Schumacher or Dan Tickton become available if they don't ditch him again by the end of next season. But I think he'll be all right, Dan. I'm quite confident. Again, nothing spectacular, but I think he'll be solid in that midfield.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, he's not going to jump in and start being the torpedo again straight away. I don't see that happening whatsoever, because at the end of the day, he's got his own reputation to try and clean. He wasn't awful. He really wasn't. And excluding his last year in Formula One, he was a solid driver. And I think, like I say, he wasn't setting the world on fire, but I don't think many people would consider him as one of the worst on the grid. So I'm hoping the Kvyat that comes back is the one we saw in his first couple of seasons, his first season at Red Bull, because I think he's solid. I think he is like a Grosjean, like a Perez, maybe not world champion material, but maybe a sort of driver that could stay on the grid for a few more years if he can find a team that really want him. So I'm looking forward to seeing him come back. And I think if he, I suppose, keeps a cool and calm head in the situation, even up against a teammate supposedly like Albon, I think he could do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think he'll be all right. Like I say, nothing special, but don't think he's going to be as terrible as people are predicting. Aussie said, "Is that a Southampton boy I can hear talking?" I'm from Southampton, are you, Dan?
No, I'm not from Southampton. No, even further south.
Carlton Danger's just said 2020 Haas get Giovinazzi and Sauber get Eilert. That's possible, That's very possible.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Eilert as well. I think he'll be in Formula One in the next few years. So, yeah, I think that definitely could be a possibility. Although I think that will all depend on what happens with Vettel and the Ferrari situation. I think that'll be the big key.
Yeah. I'm going to take two more before we go. If Hartley doesn't get a seat next year, do you think he will go? I don't think there's anywhere for him to go other than Toro Rosso, is there really? I mean, he doesn't bring any money with him, so Williams aren't going to be interested. That's not a dig at Williams, by the way. They just need the money. They really need the money. I don't think Hartley's been good enough to stay. Lovely guy, fantastic personality, and he's kind of come back and he helped Toro Rosso when they needed a driver, but I don't think he's been good enough, Dan, to be perfectly honest. I think Albon will probably get that seat, but if Albon doesn't, who else is there, really?
Yeah, I think it's between those two. I think you're right, but poor Brendan, even the story he has had as well has been incredible, but he's just not quite got the pace, unfortunately. Like I said, lovely guy, but I think if Toro Rosso do want to put up a fight in the midfield, then they need to be looking at a guy like Albon that has the potential to pull out some really star performances. But yeah, I don't think he'll be going anywhere else, unfortunately, especially not in Formula One. Maybe a development role somewhere could be a possibility. Maybe a Red Bull development role if you were really going to be kind. But poor Brendan. Sorry, Brendan fans. I don't see it happening.
I think he could end up as Toro Rosso's reserve driver if you think about it, because Dan Ticktum's not got the super license points yet to do that, and he's their next up and coming star, or that's their next driver in the Red Bull program that's available to them or old enough to compete. So he might end up with that until maybe a Dan Ticktum's ready. Maybe also having a reserve driver on the off chance that maybe a Kvyat, for example, does mess up or Albon doesn't really settle in. It'd be handy to have someone with a bit of experience as poor as he's been this year, kind of to step in if they need him to. So maybe that would be the role. We're going to take one more question. The neighbours are going crazy with their fireworks. The joys of being British. We do celebrate some weird stuff in this country. Can I just say that? We really do. But tradition and all that. All
I can't hear it down your mic, so don't worry. Hopefully no one else can, but you're good.
Kite himself think. Let's go with that one because it kind of brings us in and then ties us up nicely for this one because we've been talking about circuits. Helicopteri or Copteri, I do like that name. Says, would you pick Imola over Monza? No, not as the Italian Grand Prix. I think I'd like both. Bring back Imola and have it as the San Marino Grand Prix. But I think Monza as the Italian Grand Prix, it's kind of the tradition, isn't it, Dan? And I want Monza on there. I'd love Imola on there. But then I want to keep your Silverstones and your Hockenheims. I want the Nürburgring back. I want Malaysia to come back, even though it wasn't around till 99. But fantastic track. So many I'd love to see back. But if I had to pick between Monza and Imola, I'd rather keep Monza.
Yeah, I agree as well. And you'll be probably the better person to ask about this. Modern cars on Imola, would that really work, do you
think? I think it would probably need some modification.
Yeah.
But not. I wouldn't think it would need too much. I don't think it would need too much.
Okay.
It kind of obviously after Senna's death in '94, it got modified a bit after that with Tamburello. It got changed and they turned it into a chicane, but it is quite narrow.
Yeah, I mean, it still would be great to see it, wouldn't it? I mean, even if it's not going to be the most exciting race, I mean, the history behind it would be great to see. But yeah, I'd go Monza, the home of the Tifosi. I don't really think you can get rid of that.
No, definitely not. I'd agree with that one. So yeah, it'd be great to see Imola back. But a
Yeah.
couple in chat just saying there, maybe I think Ewan says Imola is a European Grand Prix. That'd be great. Absolutely, yeah. But it is a very tight track. It's almost, with that chicane, it is almost street circuit-esque without the barriers in many ways. And get rid of that chicane, says Jose. I think modern day F1 safe. Could you bring back Tamburello, proper Tamburello? I think you get a lot of opposition to that because of what that corner represents. So I think that chicane would probably always stay. But a few tweaks, and there's no reason why we couldn't do that. That's a very good point. So it's not the last question we're taking. Somebody just said, I forgot about the super chats. Thank you very much for that one in chat. So Andras says, where did Williams go wrong? How do you think they could? Why is that opening? Anyway, don't you love it when just for no reason at all, Adobe Suite decides to open? Where did Williams go wrong? How do you think they could get back on track? And would they need a manufacturer backing with or without Mercedes? Thank you very much for your contribution, mate. Just aero. Williams do this thing where there's a significant rule change like we saw in 2014, for example, and they make this huge step forward and they become the third or the fourth best team and they start to compete for podiums. But then as everyone else starts to progress and gain that ground, Williams don't develop as much and they end up falling backwards. And I think that's gone wrong for them just on the aero side. I would absolutely love to see Williams back up there, but I just think the money's not there for them to develop the car properly. I think they're going to need some kind of manufacturer backing. It's in some respects, as great as it is to see Red Bull taking Honda, it's a shame Williams didn't go with Honda.
Ooh, that would have been interesting. That would have been I mean, they might, if it all goes wrong at Red Bull, it could still happen. I think you're right. I mean, aerodynamically, they were never quite there even in 2014. That Mercedes engine was a huge carry factor in that season, but it's never quite gone right. And even this year, we've heard all the stories about how unbalanced the car is. I mean, at Silverstone, they kept on spinning out at the top of Stowe. So it's a difficult one. I think structurally, the team, I think, are fine. And I think even with the arguably inexperienced drivers, I don't think that was the problem. But hoping now with Paddy Lowe, a year in the team, I hope they can sort that out. But I think that's the big problem was the aerodynamics department.
Alan Guo? Oh my God, I'm terrible with names. I'm so sorry. Alan, thank you very much for your contribution, mate. Said it will be a slap in the face for McLaren if they pull it off and Max wins the Drivers' Championship. How would McLaren feel if 2 years after dropping that engine, Red Bull take that engine to a world title? Could you just imagine the meeting that goes on afterwards?
Yeah, Zach Brown's position would not look too healthy. I'm pretty sure about that. I mean, I still think they should have given it a bit more time. I know those 3 seasons weren't great, but I still don't think 3 seasons with a brand new engine partner was long enough. So already this year, I think they've made a mistake. And, well, I think they'll really need to look at what goes on in that team if Red Bull really are there.
I am in the camp of it was McLaren as much as it was Honda.
Yeah.
I'm one of those town you so people that cropped up on the internet after it all started to go right for Toro Rosso. But the last one as well was from Remy Today. Thank you very much for your contribution as well. It says Grand Prix at Zandvoort for 5 years only needs signing. Yeah, we're talking about that a little bit earlier on. Looks like a done deal. And as we were saying, Dan, it'd be great to get that circuit back on track. So it's or back on the calendar. Get a circuit back on track. Yeah, that's a new one.
I think that worked quite well. I mean, I don't care. I just want as many circuits as possible. But if we can get ones like Zandvoort, where there is such a huge and fantastic fan base that have been without a Grand Prix, then let's.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's as many as we can get. Let's just go racing around
every weekend.
I live in Lincoln. Let's get racing around Lincoln. Screw it. Let's just everywhere we can.
Very flat circuit, that one.
In Lincoln.
One hill, that doesn't count.
Lincoln is just a hill. A lot of Lincolnshire's see, people think that Lincolnshire, this is a geography lesson now. People think that Lincolnshire is just the Boston area and everything's flat. It really isn't. It's all uphill and down dale. I'm off on one.
Well, it's just country lanes down here, so that wouldn't be a great race.
Fair enough. Well, I think we'll move on, Dan, because I think we're starting to ramble a little bit for once.
As usual.
But thank you very much, mate, for coming along and joining me for this one. It was a pleasure as always, and I shall hopefully talk to you in a few minutes about what we've got planned for Thursday.
That sounds brilliant, mate. Thanks for having me as always, and great to see you all and speaking to you all in chat as well.
Lovely, mate. Thank you very much.
See ya.
Yep, thank you very much as always to Dan, and of course to you guys for tuning in. A few of you now talking about races you'd like to see. Lincoln is as steep as... Yes, it is. Yes. Thomas Ashmore, the most original name for a steep hill. They called it Steep Hill. That was it. But yeah, we'll move on from that one. But thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. I will be doing something a little bit different tomorrow. I'm going to be chopping this stream up into 2 or 3 sections, one video for each topic, and popping it up on the channel for those who like the shorter content and just want to hear the highlights of the stream, if you like, rather than the full thing. But don't worry if you like listening to this in the car or at work or anything like that. The stream will still be going up in full for those who prefer to watch the full one, so don't worry about that one. I'll be back with the news roundup on Tuesday. We've got the weekend warm-up Wednesday, the classic race watch-along on Thursday, so watch out for that poll tomorrow, and then it's all the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend content. Love Brazil, so really looking forward to that one. In the meantime, though, make sure you are following me over on social media for updates. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course the Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.